Hi, it's Todd Rielage, your 2018 trip leader for the Africa Fire Mission Kilimanjaro trip. In this episode, we're going to be talking about two subjects. The first one being pressure breathing, and the second one is going to be all about trekking poles. So, welcome for those of you that have jumped on board with us over the last month since our last episode. Be sure to go back and revisit the first episode about exercises and an itinerary. So let's get started off talking about pressure breathing. All right, so pressure breathing is a technique that we use at high altitude, and if anybody has any kind of high altitude mountaineering experience, this is a standard in the business. It is nothing that I made up. This has been a standard for a long time in how to start combating some of the effects of altitude with a breathing technique. Now, what pressure breathing does is that it enhances the oxygen exchange at altitude. So remember, at altitude, and when I say altitude, we're talking really like anything over 7,000, 8,000 feet. There, as we get higher, there is less pressure in the atmosphere. Now, a lot of people have the misnomer that there's less oxygen. Believe it or not, the concentration of oxygen is still the same on the top of Everest or the top of Kilimanjaro or at sea level. What changes is the density of the molecules or the pressure. So while if you had a 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot cube, there's still 20% oxygen in that cube in all of the different particles. But the problem is at altitude is there are fewer total molecules. So what that does for us is when we inhale at altitude, we're only inhaling a fraction of the oxygen molecules that we normally would be at sea level. Okay, so why this is important is our body reacts kind of adversely to this. It recognizes the fact that we don't have the oxygen consumption that we normally do. And of course, with trekking, climbing, those kind of harder activities, our body needs more oxygen than if we're just standing still. So our body is going to start trying to find oxygen. So what this is going to do is trigger a reflex where our body is going to want to start breathing heavier. And it's just a normal tendency for all humans to want to breathe heavier, of course, when we exert effort, but especially at altitude when our brain is signaling we don't have enough oxygen with the amount of work we're doing, it's going to increase our respiratory rate. The problem with this is while we're trying to get more oxygen, the problem comes down to is that our depth of breathing is usually more shallow. So this leads to a terrible oxygen exchange deep-seated in our lungs. Okay, so what we do to combat this is something called pressure breathing. Okay, pressure breathing is a technique where we'll inhale, and I'll explain it all. We'll inhale, we'll pause for a second, and then we'll exhale greatly. Now, this is a technique we're going to use above 7,000, 8,000 feet, but really it can be used anytime during hard exercise. I know I use it during my running. Through some of my marathons, I've used it when I'm actually exerting a lot of effort during firefighting activity. I've been known to throw in a few pressure breaths as well, just because the concept is the same. I'm forcing more oxygen down into the deeper parts of my lungs so that I can get greater oxygen exchange in a short amount of time, and therefore it feeds my muscles the fuel it needs to push on. Okay, so what is pressure breathing? Pressure breathing, and the way we do this is usually it is a deep inhalation through your nose, and then a pause for about a half a second to a second. We're going to take that deep breath. We want to feel it all the way in towards our diaphragm. We want to make sure we're standing upright. We're not hunched over with our backpack. Like we were talking in the previous episode, standing upright, get that good insulation, pause for a second, and then we're going to exhale forcefully through our mouth with almost pursed lips. So it's going to look something like this. So while it seems kind of funny, I guarantee you that while you incorporate this into your climbing technique at altitude, your body starts to recognize the positive pressure that is happening in your lungs, and it's forcing better gas exchange in the alveoli, which is the little sacs that have the capillaries right in them, where our blood vessels are going to grab that oxygen and feed it right to our muscles right where we need it most. By pausing that second, kind of seems weird, but it gives us a chance for our lungs to catch up with that deep inflation and really deeply inflate down at the bottom and really get that deep oxygen exchange. So this is something where if you do it too much and you're not at altitude, you could probably hyperventilate. Not something you want to do all the time at sea level. Your body's going to recognize you have too much and you're not able to blow off the carbon dioxide. So that's another thing that pressure breathing does for us, is that it gets rid of that carbon dioxide and makes that exchange a lot better. So the carbon dioxide is not trapped in our lungs either, which raises the acidity of our blood. So hence it tells us we need to breathe more. But really what ends up happening is we just breathe more but shallower. Okay? So again, those pursed lips, for some reason, it just creates that back pressure you need for that oxygen exchange to happen. It sounds a little funny when you got 20 people going up the mountain doing this. And a little word of warning is that when I was on Kilimanjaro before doing these pressure breathing techniques, some of the guides, the African guides there, didn't quite know what I was doing, and they thought I was hyperventilating. So they would tell me, no, just slow your breathing down. It's just an education thing. They kind of got it once they realized that it was really enhancing my climb, and I was able to explain a little bit more. So again, that's just a great tactic. It's something you can practice now during some heavier exercise. It's not uncommon as we get up into the 17,000 foot range during summit day to be throwing in a pressure breath every other step. On Rainier, when it was really not as high, but really exhausting, I was throwing in a pressure breath almost every step. Okay. Notice that this isn't something you can just step, and breathe, right? When we get up on summit day, it is step, breathe, step, breathe. So it's one of those where almost you get into a rhythm if you have to pressure breathe that much. Your body almost gets into a rhythm with your trekking poles, your steps, and then your breathing technique. So it's really cool to see, and it really doesn't take long for you to start to feel the effects of the enhanced oxygen exchange. Something you can do at lower altitudes too, if you start to feel nauseated, start to feel out of breath, just throw in a couple pressure breaths, and I guarantee you will start to feel better within a couple minutes. All right, so enough about pressure breathing. Let's move on to our second subject of this month's video, which is all about trekking poles. Okay. Trekking poles are integral to the success of a climb. Not mandated by any means. Tons of people hiked way before trekking poles came out. You know, they were called walking sticks or something like that. But trekking pole technology over the last 10, 15 years has really kind of revolutionized some of the climbing and the hiking business. And I got to tell you, when they first came out about 15, 20 years ago, I was very skeptical. I didn't have them. I thought true hikers didn't need them. And then I gave one a try, and I kind of ate my words, because what trekking poles can do for you is make your life easier. There's a philosophy out there called ultralight backpacking. They might poo-poo a lot of trekking poles, but for the normal climber and the climber, especially on treks like Kilimanjaro or any of the mountaineering adventures you might go on, trekking poles are a must. So here's what trekking poles can do for you. Number one, by using trekking poles, you're going to lighten the load on your legs. Now, by using the same technique, the techniques we showed you last month, the exercises are there for you to learn and to condition your muscles so that we can climb efficiently and effectively, right? But if we can take off some pounds of our legs with our legs, with these trekking poles, then we're going to be ahead of the game. And believe it or not, by using trekking poles, you can lighten your load on your legs by about 15 pounds. So, there's not much you can take out of your backpack that lightens you by 15 pounds. You would have to do a lot of running to lose 15 pounds of weight. So by adding the couple pounds in your pack with the trekking poles, you're actually saving pounds in the end. And really, it's all about the repetition and the movement of your legs getting saved over time. All right, this is great for going up hills and down hills. It will save your legs in both facets of climbing. And a personal favorite of mine, sometimes I always wonder, what am I going to do with my hands? It gives my hands something to do. So kind of an odd one, but believe it or not, that's something I actually need. There are lots of different types of trekking poles out there, lots of different brands. There's all the main name brands that you find out there, the Outdoor Research, the Black Diamonds, Camp, and these are Leckies, all great trekking poles. What I would want to stay away from are the cheaper Walmart type brand. Nothing against that if you shop there, but just some of that kind of camping equipment. Those lesser known brand trekking poles, while they may be okay, you really want to go with a tried, true, and tested brand and from a reputable outdoor company. Now, it's going to cost you a little bit of money. It's going to cost you about $100 or more to get a good, solid set. But I know a lot of them have lifetime warranties. These Leckies I've had for about 8 years now, and all you got to do is contact a rep, and you can get them to them, and they'll fix them or they'll replace them. So I know Outdoor Research usually has a lifetime warranty on their product too. I know Black Diamond's got great stuff. So go with one of those reputable companies if you don't have trekking poles that you know and trust yet. There are some differences in trekking pole design. As you can see, handles, sometimes you'll find different grips on handles. It's just going to be personal preference. All of them do the same thing. All of them should have wristlets, as you see here, these tabs that hang off the back. And all of them will have some sort of extending telescopic pole here. Going back to the grips, some of them are cork, some are kind of squishy vinyl, like foam. Some will be just hard plastic. It just usually depends. Most of the more name brands now use cork because it absorbs sweat a little better, gives you still that pretty good grip with that as well. So different types of trekking poles. There are actually some that have springs in these shafts, just very, very small springs. And all they do is take the give out. These actually have a small spring to it, not much, maybe only about 1/8 of an inch of travel. And that's supposed to help lighten some of the shock load as you plant your trekking pole. Not a necessity. I don't even really notice it very much in these. And some of them are fixed, so that's not a big deal either. Either one is fine for Kilimanjaro. What we also have in these are twist locks. So all I need to do is unscrew it, pull it out to the desired level. I don't know if you can see on this one, but you'll have different markings that tell you how far to pull it out. Right there, they'll have different markings so that you can set them the same. All trekking poles will have that, and then you just lock them down. There are other trekking poles, such as the one I've got here, that have locking tabs. So very easy to use. All you're going to do is unclick the tab and then extend the pole where you need it, and then lock the tab back. So not very hard to use those either. All the name brands usually have either or. It's going to be a personal preference thing at that point. Okay. So how do we use these trekking poles? And we'll kind of I'll show you some of the technique, but one of the best things to do is to get out and practice with them, because everybody has different body types, everybody has different preferences. Maybe you want your trekking poles to be up a little higher, down a little bit lower. So as you do your hiking and your different exercises and things like that, go ahead and try them out. So you best know where and what settings you like to use with them. So Normally a good starting point is if you have your elbows bent with your arms at 90 degrees and you're just standing tall. That will give you a good starting point, and that's usually a good familiar feel to most hikers that are hiking on level ground or somewhat level ground. As we increase the incline, as we're going uphill, it may be necessary, especially on something like Kilimanjaro, if we know we're going to be pretty much walking or climbing, hiking uphill for most of the day, to shorten those shafts of your trekking poles a couple inches. But that's going to be a preference thing. If you're going up and down and up and down and up and down hills, sometimes that just gets a little bothersome to keep on adjusting trekking poles. I rarely adjust my trekking poles throughout the day unless I know it's something like Kilimanjaro where we are just going to go up, 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 and up. The converse of this, of course, is that if we're going downhill, we're going to lengthen those trekking poles a couple inches in order to get a little bit better bite going down. And so we don't have to lean over as much. We can keep our center of gravity back a little bit in order to get our trekking pole planted properly. So get out there and hike with them. Try these different techniques, and I think you'll find that the trekking pole, once you integrate it into your hiking routine, will really start to save your knees more than hiking without. One more thing about trekking poles is there's usually a few different items that come with your trekking pole. First one here is one of these rubber ends that come onto the trekking pole. If you take them off, there are hard points, not sharp, but they're hard so that they can actually kind of get sunk into the ground. If you have a really, really soft mud or you're hiking on pavement, sometimes using the rubber ends, the rubber feet on the bottom are the way to go. For Kilimanjaro, we're not going to be using them as much. Bring them with you. You never know. They don't weigh anything. You can just stick them in your pack. But we're not going to be seeing a lot of pavement on Kilimanjaro, that's for sure. The other thing that you're going to get, which you might use a little bit more on Kilimanjaro, is the basket. The basket just screws on here like this, and you may or may not find them when you buy them with them on. All the snow basket does is give you a wider base for whatever you're stabbing into. Whether it be snow or mud, that you don't plant this all the way in and you lose 6-8 inches of trekking pole into whatever surface it is that you're hiking on. So it just spreads out the surface area. Very, very key in snow or very muddy events. Again, don't know what summit day is going to look like. There's scree. That could be a possibility too, to use a snow basket as well. That scree is just like that fine powdery volcanic powder. So as you plunge the trekking pole into that scree, you very well may want a little bit wider basket or wider surface to catch more and spread out that pressure you're putting down onto that trekking pole. Okay, one more thing on trekking poles here are how to properly put them on. There is an incorrect way. I mean, there's nothing incorrect. If it works for you, it works. But the best way to use these are to use the wrist tabs. And when the wrist tabs are properly used, you're going to actually be putting most of the weight on that wrist tab. So to do that, you're going to come up from the bottom of the wrist tab and then grab the handle. And what this does is it allows you to maneuver the pole without really having a death grip on that handle. And it also allows you to push down with your hand without that death grip and take a lot of the load and transfer that load onto your wrist. First couple times I used it, I did one of these where I came in from the top, and you think this is working well, and it may for a bit, but eventually your hands are going to get slippery, get tired or whatnot. If you adjust these, and most good brands have adjustable length of these straps, come up from the bottom, grab it, and you will find that this is going to be the most comfortable way in order to grip and hold your trekking pole. So that's it for trekking poles. If you have any questions or anything like that, my email is down there. Feel free to shoot me an email about brands or any more tips or tricks or just questions you might have about the video. pressure breathing or trekking poles or anything else about Kilimanjaro, really, be happy to help you. That's what I'm here for. In the meantime, make sure you're getting out and hiking. Make sure you're doing your exercises. Get on that Stairmaster, find those hills, and start getting after it, because December will be here before you know it. We're in the same year now. So until then, be safe and have fun.